Hi, I'm Doug McKenzie and welcome to the Fintech Show. As we prepare to settle into winter here at FF, we can't help but think about what 2024 has in store for fintech. AI and big data is on our mind after a year that took ChatGPT to household name status. They grow up so fast, don't they? Well, we want to know how all this emerging tech is actually helping us. Thankfully, we have three guests who give us the biggest lowdown on some of the challenges and potential solutions to banks and their big data problems. First up, over at Sibos in Toronto, Canada, I managed to catch up with SmartStream's Roland Brandli for a quiet chat, which can be a rare thing at that event, I'll tell you. Roland explained how SmartStream are detecting and dissecting patterns in customer data to allow for the most frictionless experience possible. Now, here at FF, we love cold, hard use cases, and something which UniCredit's Dr. Shivaji Dasgupta had in spades when we met in Milan to speak about AI and its real measurable effects when utilizing customer data. Meanwhile, Tim Goodfellow sat down with Jonathan Hall from NatWest at our studio here in London to discuss the goals for AI for 2024 and beyond. So, get comfortable and enjoy your daily dose of data in this episode of the Fintech Show. Roland, how are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. Lovely to be in Toronto.
Right, the sun is shining and Sibos is always a lot of fun. It's so busy this year. And I mean, how have you found it so far?
It's been really good. I mean, I'm here really because we were invited by Swift. We're part of the case expert group and they actually asked us to demo our software here. So that's quite unusual, you know, as a vendor to be asked by Swift to demo a solution. Obviously, the transition that Swift's doing with their exception management, with their new message types, with their automation, is creating quite a lot of interest. And that fits in our agenda because obviously what we tend to like to do is deliver pre-configured, out-of-the-box solutions. Not a lot of customization, just configuration. And so that really fits like, you know, a glove on a hand.
Yeah. Absolutely brilliant. And speaking of these changes in payments, I think it's spearheading a lot of operational change within many institutions, especially the ones here naturally at Sibos. What do you think the ISO 20022 standard is going to do for the sheer amount of data that banks are now going to be able to play around with, but have to deal with?
Well, I mean, first of all, the thing that they're going to have to do in a lot of cases, and a lot have already done that, is change the legacy systems because they weren't built to deal with that sort of data.
Yeah.
And then it goes into a theme that we've been exploring for a long time, and that is the next thing is identifying how you can use that data, right? And I don't think everyone has a clear picture of that. And as you know, in the industry for the last 3-4 years, everyone's been crying, you know, data is gold, data is gold. In many cases, you could ask yourself, is it fool's gold, right? Especially when you're looking at, I don't know how you feel about it, but when banks are telling you, oh, we'll advertise to you as you walk past a shop, are you really going to look at that?
No,
you know?
The bank is the first advert.
Exactly. But I think where it really comes into play is operationally. So, you know, SmartStream is quite unique because whilst we're known mainly for our reconciliation across the enterprise, we also have other solutions such as cash and liquidity, corporate actions, collateral, etc. In many cases, it comes off the same data set. And so it's really all about connecting the dots and putting context into it. Now, because we do operational control, we really have probably the widest set of data with the deepest quality within a banking organization. So it's a question, where can they reuse that data? And also at the same time, where can they find out when they have difficulties? Where does the actual source come from?
Could you give our viewers an introduction to yourself and your role here at UniCredit?
Sure. I'm a physicist and then started working in consultancy and post-consultancy, having working in different financial services, always in the technology and data space. And at UniCredit, I lead the Global Data and Intelligence Office. In this role, we are focusing on making data accessible And this is something you may have heard, the democratization of data, so that we can move from static use of data to much more self-service use of data. This is the core of our data strategy today. And this also builds into the digital strategy, which we are working towards, where we want to have platforms of technology services based on which business and divisional services can be built on. One of these platforms is the data services as well as the AI services that we can build on. To do that, we need to make the data clean, the quality trustworthy, and the data accessible through the right pipelines and consumable.
Absolutely brilliant. And could you tell us, our viewers, some of the use cases that UniCredit can see coming out of using AI on such large data sets?
Sure. So I think not just AI, we just start on consumption of data, because I think many times we jump too far before we take the smaller steps. I think there are a huge plethora of use cases which we are doing within this space, whether it's on ESG dashboarding, whether it's on anti-money laundering, whether it's on use of analytics for identifying customer segments, or even identifying our risk segmentation and also doing simulations on these risk segmentations. These are all various different uses of data, and AI can play a big role, and AI is playing a big role in many of these areas. Concretely, we also have use cases, whether it's in natural language processing, whether it's around the topics of generative AI, where we are also testing some of these use cases and starting out experimentation.
Jonathan, how are you doing?
Really well. Great to be here, Tim. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your insights on this topic. Of course, as I say, everybody is talking about it. It's kind of very much the hot topic. But I think what everybody really wants to know, particularly in finance and fintech, is what are the actual tangible benefits? It's going beyond just generative AI. What can we use this for in institution to perhaps assess risk and mitigate risk and these sorts of things? Could you talk us through some of that? Sure,
absolutely. Delighted. And you're right, it's a really hot topic, isn't it? And only today, actually quite timely, that Collins Dictionary said that AI is the word of the year. Okay. So, it is that hot, right? So just stepping back a little bit, Tim, I think the way I think about AI and the way the bank deploys it, we deploy it right across front, middle and back office. So there's a whole range of use cases, and actually the use cases is not the constraining factor at all with AI. It's about an organization's aptitude for the technology, it's the capacity to then deploy it, and its risk appetite to do so. So, just to give you a few flavors, and AI has been around quite a long time in different forms, from kind of rules-based process optimization to machine learning, and then only recently have we seen the generative AI type technology. So we've been deploying kind of the first two for years, right? If you think about personalization, if you think about fraud detection, that is all driven off the back of kind of largely artificial intelligence. But only recently now, of course, have we got our hands on the generative AI. So really exciting, but also it's, we've got to tread carefully with this new technology to make sure that we're doing the right things for our customers.
And I suppose one area that we'd be interested in hearing about is potentially how it can improve the efficiency and accuracy of collateral valuation and kind of monitoring that area of banking activity. Do you think it can help with that?
Absolutely. So traditionally what you'll find in banks is that so the credit processors don't necessarily talk to each other. So we might do some scoring up front, but then we might hold the security for customers on a different platform, and the two don't talk together. And we might have some very good descriptors about what security we hold against those loans, but actually does it update frequently, and so on and so forth. So actually, by the deployment of artificial intelligence, what we can do is update, use different data sources, pull those in, use the unstructured to structured type principles that this technology provides to give us much better real-time valuations and assessments, which of course then would help us perhaps, if we're holding certain security levels and we assess a customer, they may be able to draw down further against that security. On the other hand, it might pull into our back office and have an impact on our risk-weighted assets. If indeed, we're looking at specific sectors and how, for instance, commercial real estate kind of valuations are changing over time. So taking it from the static to the real time is really the kind of hardcore benefits of where it can assist in that particular process.
A lot of traditional institutions, they're dealing with a lot of legacy systems. They're also not tech companies, they're banks. They're trying to operate a bank at the same time as revolutionizing their core. Can SmartStream operate in a kind of lower code or even a no code solution to kind of sit on top?
Yeah, so I mean, that's definitely what we always do. We sit on top, right? So I always used to explain it, imagine it like a factory workshop, right? Where you've got a conveyor belt, which is potentially your broadest system. It could be a data bus, but it could also be your core banking system because everything touches those.
Yeah.
And then you have lots of robots in between that do transactions. So you have your treasury systems or your trading systems, your payment system, your portfolio management system. And what SmartStream does is really sit on top of that and make sure as that data flows through those systems, it is correct, right? And if it's not correct, throws up an exception, allows you to handle it. But again, if you're using that strategically, it will show you then also issues that continue to be repeated and allows you to define a strategy how to change that, right? And the change will come from the underlying processing systems. But it's very much that sort of concept. And so it's really about having operational control across the enterprise, but also across all those different systems and across, following transactions throughout their life cycle. And that is quite often not really understood. So again, you look at the simplest thing like a payment exception. The first thing that happens when there's a problem is you'll have to go and check how was that payment instructed by the customer. So you're going to access a system, because most banks do it now via an internet banking portal.
Yeah.
And you're going to actually check what was entered by the customer. And then you're going to check how was it executed to see if there are any differences. And then you're going to actually go through the exception, potentially ending up in a reversal or whatever. Now, that's a life cycle. What people tend to do now is they get this problem, the inquiry, and then they're actually physically having to log into that original system, check that, with their eyes or whatever, then decide what they want to do. And that consumes
That's a long time.
a disproportionate amount of time, and it's just unnecessary work. So I think there's a lot of things that we can add to the game. And it is beginning to have a look at those things holistically.
Now, one thing that always came up when open banking was still a hot topic was obviously that sharing of data. And obviously when you work with different organizations, there's all those challenges with that. How do you at UniCredit manage that data? It's got to be clean, but it's also got to be safe and secure. How do you manage that?
Yeah, the large data sets that we are managing, there's a full data security as well as data protection mechanisms in place, which prevents data from leaking, but also the right people accessing the right data sets.
Interesting.
AI can actually help us, and we are doing some experimentation in that sense on how can we actually manage the access rights based on the rules that we have put in the system, but AI then learns and increases the scope for these colleagues in the Active Directory to access the right sets of data.
So AI has kind of become a bit of a buzzword in the industry. So let's try and remove that. How are you looking at utilizing AI, and what really excites you about the technology moving forward?
So for us, technology is only as good as the results it brings for our customers, and also the removing all the obstacles the customers may have in their processes. And that's why the most exciting part for UniCredit is when we can use technology, including AI, to actually bring value to our customers end to end. And to that effect, we have found quite a few processes where we may actually add completely new flavor by adding AI to it. Not as much as automation, where we would just do parts of automation, which is also important in some important processes or long winding processes. AI, on the other hand, we can actually redesign an existing process or even create completely new services, completely new products for the customer. One of the examples is in Italy, we have a lot of checks which we process, and we have to verify the signature. And these are human signatures which we need to verify. And that is the reason why we have introduced natural language processing to actually recognize these signatures and thereby making this process quite light touch with humans and still having a much higher accuracy of identifying the right signatures. And those are the kind of use cases on AI that excite us. Now, you also mentioned generative AI. This is a completely new area which we have already started experimenting on in quite a few big areas. But even there, we are actually looking for end-to-end process redesign with this kind of technology rather than just piecemeal approach.
Artificial intelligence, it's being fed data from vast amounts of sources. You can't necessarily guarantee its integrity. How do you ensure that there is a certain level of integrity to that data and validate it for the purposes of the bank?
Yeah, so it's a really important consideration. So, I mean, we all know kind of databases in previous times, there was the old adage, garbage in, garbage out. But I think with the new technologies, there are programs now which actually can clean up data as it goes through. So for example, it can identify where there are duplications, it can identify trends and where there is particular data points that sit outside of those trends. So actually we can use kind of these auto programs to clean up data. So actually the coin has completely been flipped in that respect. However, I think there's a kind of further consideration, which is actually as the technology is increasing in complexity and is advancing, we as a bank need to ensure that actually the models are transparent. And actually, we've all heard about the term hallucinations and so on and so forth with generative AI, and we've got to be very careful about how we go about deploying this technology, and especially if it's going direct to customers. So from our perspective, we want to make sure that we are innovating in a mindful way, but actually we're doing safe exploration. The majority of the things that we're looking at with the new technology we term as kind of co-pilots, and that's a less risky way for us to deploy this. And what that means is it's not direct to customers. So we will deploy it side by side with an RM or a web chat agent or a telephony handler. So it will actually draw information forward as it in real time, say, analyzes a web chat, and then that will help speed up interactions with customers, and then we can test the outcomes with our specialists. So it's a really, really important consideration and one we're taking very seriously.
That's all we have time for on this episode of the Fintech Show. I want to say a massive thank you to you, our viewers. You can catch the rest of the series and so much more over at ffnews.com. Of course, LinkedIn, where you'll see me, Doug McKenzie, in the comments. See you around.